like to focus on one very intriguing pasuk in our parsha, where Moshe Rabbeinu, as he gives his speech to the Jewish people and offers his instructions on what to do when we come to Eretz Yisrael, says, Lo ta'asun k'chol asher anachnu osim po hayom. Don't do all of these things that we're doing here today. Ish kol yashar ba'inav. Each person, how he sees fit. And this pasuk seems to be criticizing the Jewish people and saying that there's behavior is inadequate and each person doing what they want and not following the rules, that has to change. But this is not how most of the Mefarshim understand this pasuk. And before we expand on that, I want to highlight the fact that this pasuk is also paraphrased as the closing pasuk of Sefer Shoftim in the Navi. The very last pasuk of Sefer Shoftim, Bayamim hahem ein melech b'Yisrael. The period of the Shoftim was the time period after we came to Eretz Yisrael, after the time of Yoshua, through the monarchy and the kingship with Shaul and David HaMelech in Sefer Shmuel. And the Sefer concludes that at this time period, the time period of the Shoftim, there was no king. Each person did as he pleased, as he saw fit. And here also it seems to be a critique of the Jewish people and highlighting all of their troubles during the period of the Shoftim, rooted in the fact that there was no king and each person did whatever he wanted and no one really behaved. But when you think about it, there's really another way to understand these words and maybe even the meaning of these psukim. That, is it really true that when there's a melech, things are better? Is it really true that when there's a king, the people are always going to behave because they're instructed to do so by that king? Well, that was sometimes the case, but not really always. If we had a great king, he inspired the people, he legislated good rules, and the people followed, mostly. If we didn't have a good king, he would promulgate avodah zarah and idolatry throughout the Jewish people. So sometimes it was better with the king, sometimes it was worse. Sometimes it would be better for each person, each kol hayashar be'einav ya'aseh, to do what he saw. Maybe there's a positive in each person not doing as he pleased, but doing as he saw ethically and religiously appropriate. In the case of Sefer Shoftim, most Mefarshim understand it as a critique because overall it was seen as a negative time period. And this pasuk follows the last story of Pilegesh Begivah, which was disastrous. In our parsha, in Parshas Reeh, the Mefarshim actually don't take it as a critique because in the context, it appears amongst many laws describing the korbanos, the sacrifices that are brought in the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash. And it doesn't seem that the pasuk or that Moshe Rabbeinu is really trying to give a one-sentence rebuke out of context in this section. And therefore, they understand it as really giving advice on a specific rule. For example, the Ramban says that Ish kol yashar be'einav ya'aseh refers to the behavior of the Jewish people in the Midbar, in the desert, because when we were in the desert, there were no obligatory sacrifices. Each person brought whenever he felt inspired to bring a sacrifice. Ish kol yashar be'einav ya'aseh, whenever he saw that he wanted or she wanted to bring a korban, they would do so. But no longer is that the case, because when we come to Eretz Yisrael, there are going to be certain mandated sacrifices that we are to bring. So we'll no longer do what we chose, but rather what we're commanded to. But there is no critique or negativity associated with this idea of offering korbanos when you wanted. That was how it was supposed to be. So it's possible that these two interpretations really raise attention in that sometimes individual decision-making could be negative, but sometimes it can be positive. And sometimes we can behave even better when we're making our own choices. And sometimes we're supposed to make our own choices and decisions. like in that time period, bring a korban when you want to, because then it's your inspiration that's driving your religious practice. It's interesting that the avos were called Yesharim, the same word, Ish Kol HaYashar, Yesharim. And the Netziv speaks about the fact that Bereshis, which mostly tells the stories of the avos, is to be called Sefer HaYashar, because it's the story of the Yesharim. The Yesharim are the avos, and remarkably, the avos were people who acted in a proper way without ever getting a mode of commandments. They never got a Torah, a code of law to follow, but they instinctively had this quality of being a Yashar. But I believe that for us, the entire purpose of all the commandments of the Torah is to create a Yashrus in us, that we are to do the mitzvahs and to study them, and then to gain an instinct of how to behave. Kol Yashar be'einav yaseh. We should do what we see as correct, but that should be guided by what Hashem has commanded us through His Torah. So I think that there's a real message for us to always understand that the goal of the Torah is to make it that Ish Kol Yashar be'einav yaseh, that we will always do what we see as correct, but we will learn through the mitzvos that we will make Asay Ritzoncha Ritzono, our will should become God's will, that we should align our value system with the values of the Torah by studying and practicing its laws, and then they will become instinctive to us like they were to the Avos who we emulate so much. Good Shabbos.